Welcome back to Two Robots Talking. You know, today we're going to dive into something that's been bugging me for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Why are so many modern buildings kind of like, well, blah, especially here in America?
Interesting.
You ever get that feeling like when you're walking by some of those concrete blocks
Uh-huh.
that you should be wearing a gray jumpsuit and eating gruel?
Right.
So I've got some articles here about brutalism and the history of beauty and how modern architecture kind of shook things up.
Okay.
I'm hoping we can figure out, like, are these buildings trying to make us feel small or keep us down? And should we be demanding more inspiring structures?
It's a good question, yeah. And maybe we can start with that bombable building idea you mentioned from the Brutalism article.
Yeah.
But that's a bold claim, right? Like some structures are intentionally designed to be expendable.
It's like they're just waiting to be blown up, which
Uh-huh.
I get, but wouldn't that just make people even more nihilistic? Like, if everything's temporary, then why bother caring about anything?
Well, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. This whole idea actually emerged after World War II, after the devastation of cities like Dresden.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the impact on architects, seeing such beauty reduced to rubble.
Yeah, a whole city just gone like that.
Exactly. It led some to believe that maybe permanence was an illusion, that even beauty itself was fleeting. And so they started focusing on function over form, stripping away ornamentation in favor of raw, honest materials like concrete.
And also, brutalism was like a response to the trauma of war.
Yeah, I think you could say that, but some of those buildings are pretty harsh.
I know, it's kind of true.
True, but brutalism also rejected the perceived excesses of pre-war architecture, all those ornate decorations and elaborate facades.
Right.
It was really a call for simplicity, a rejection of what some saw as superficiality.
So it wasn't just about being bombable. It was about stripping away the fluff and getting back to basics.
Exactly.
This all ties into a bigger conversation about beauty.
Right.
Like how we went from agreeing on what's beautiful to beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. The rise and fall of beauty in Western culture and Venetian letter, those articles, they trace that shift so well.
Yeah.
They argue that we've moved from a concept of objective beauty to a more subjective view of taste.
So instead of aiming for a shared sense of beauty, we're all just expressing personal preferences now.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And as that happened, beauty got separated from truth and goodness, leading to that whole art for art's sake idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If beauty is just subjective, it doesn't have to be connected to any higher purpose.
Right.
It's just about what an individual finds pleasing.
Okay.
And this shift had a major impact on architecture.
How so?
Well, Alain de Botton talks about how architects began avoiding what he calls beautifying moves,
Interesting.
prioritizing originality over creating, an emotional response in the viewer.
So instead of uplifting or inspiring people, the focus became creating something unique, even if it wasn't traditionally beautiful.
Precisely, the architect became more of an artist expressing a personal vision rather than a craftsman creating something for a shared purpose.
That reminds me of something I read about how early architects, they were all about roofs. Like the Latin roots of architect literally referred to arches and roofs. But now it seems like it's all about the architect's unique artistic vision.
You're right, and all this coincided with other massive changes like the rise of cars and urban sprawl.
Right. We completely lost the human scale of cities.
Think about a charming European city center versus a sprawling American suburb.
Narrow cobblestone streets and human scale buildings versus a sea of concrete and glass.
Exactly. And the materials changed so drastically, we moved from natural elements like stone and wood to steel, glass, and concrete.
Have you ever noticed how different it feels to walk through a forest compared to like a concrete jungle? Like, does concrete actually make us feel worse?
It's not just a feeling. Venetian letter delves into neuroscience, and it shows how our brains are wired for beauty through evolution. We literally have this, what they call morphine high pathway.
Wait a minute.
That gets activated by beautiful scenes.
So are you saying ugly buildings can actually make us feel bad?
Well, studies suggest that dull environments can increase stress and negatively impact well-being.
Wow.
But on the other hand, beautiful architecture can improve mood and even help hospital patients heal faster.
Buildings that can actually heal. That's incredible.
It is. I never really considered that our surroundings could have such a profound impact on us.
So where do we go from here? If we know beauty is so powerful, shouldn't we be demanding more of it in our buildings?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore as we dive deeper into these sources.
Okay.
But first, let's unpack this whole idea of beauty a little further.
Okay. Sound good.
So you're asking if we should demand more beautiful buildings.
Yeah.
Especially in America.
Yeah.
But that begs the question, what is beauty anyway?
Right.
It's so subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder and all that.
Right.
So how can we even agree on what makes a building beautiful, let alone demand it?
Well, Venetian letter kind of challenges that whole notion of pure subjectivity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it argues that there's actually more universal understanding of beauty, particularly in architecture.
Interesting. So it's not just random opinions.
Right, think about the golden ratio.
Okay.
It's this mathematical ratio, about 1 to 1.618, that pops up everywhere in nature, from sunflowers to seashells.
Wow.
It creates visually harmonious proportions, and we see it reflected in art and architecture across cultures and time periods.
The golden ratio, I've heard of that, but I never really understood it.
Uh-huh.
So you're saying it's like a code for beauty embedded in the universe.
In a way, yeah, and our brains seem to be hardwired to respond to it.
Oh, wow.
Remember that morphine high pathway?
Yeah.
Well, it seemed to be activated not just by nature, but also by well-designed buildings that incorporate these principles.
So walking into a beautiful cathedral could trigger the same response as staring at a sunset.
Exactly.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is.
But if our brains are so attuned to beauty, why are we surrounded by so much ugliness?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Venetian letter suggests a few factors. One is the rise of modernism in architecture.
Okay.
And while it brought innovations, it also shifted focus away from traditional beauty.
Right, like that whole form follows function idea.
Exactly.
Stripping everything down to pure utility.
Right. And while function is important, it can lead to kind of bland or even harsh designs, especially with materials like concrete and steel on a large scale.
Which is why a lot of people find modern architecture cold and impersonal.
Yeah, not exactly soul-nourishing.
No.
And then there's the evolution of cities themselves, urban sprawl,
Right.
car-centric design, the need for quick and cheap construction.
Yeah.
All these things contribute to a less human-centered approach.
So we've prioritized efficiency and practicality over beauty and well-being. And maybe we're paying the price for it now.
I think so.
People are craving beauty connection. Something more than just functional boxes to live in.
I think that's a key point. People are looking for spaces that uplift and inspire them,
Yeah.
not just meet their basic needs.
Okay, so we know beauty matters. We know our brains crave it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually get more of it, especially in a world that often prioritizes profit over people?
It's a complex challenge, but it starts with recognizing that beauty has value.
Okay.
We need to stop dismissing it as frivolous and start seeing it as essential to our well-being.
Yes, we need to reclaim beauty as a priority.
I agree.
It's not just about aesthetics.
Right.
It's about creating spaces that connect us to something larger than ourselves.
I like that.
Spaces that make us feel alive.
Exactly. And we need to advocate for designs that prioritize human well-being, not just efficiency or profit.
Right.
That means human-scale buildings, natural elements,
Yes.
and materials that are both beautiful and sustainable.
Bringing nature into our cities is so important.
Absolutely. Parks, trees, green spaces. It all makes a difference. It softens the hard edges.
It does, and we can learn from the past, too.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason why ancient temples and cathedrals still captivate us. They were built with a deep understanding of beauty and proportion.
Yeah.
Something we've kind of lost sight of.
So it's not about copying the past, but learning from it.
Exactly.
Taking those timeless principles and applying them to modern challenges.
Precisely. And it's not just about grand structures either.
Oh, okay.
We can create beauty in our everyday lives. Choosing well-designed objects, arranging our homes thoughtfully. Even just appreciating the beauty that already exists around us.
Right. Beauty isn't just something out there to be found.
Right.
It's something we can cultivate in our own lives.
Exactly.
In big ways and small.
And speaking of cultivating beauty, let's circle back to that fascinating research about the brain's morphine high.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Our brains release endorphins when we experience beauty.
It's like we're being rewarded for seeking it out. I love that idea.
So here's a thought. What if we actively sought out beauty more often?
Okay.
Made it a conscious practice.
Like a beauty scavenger hunt for our brains.
Exactly.
But what would that look like in practice? It could be something as simple as taking a few minutes each day
Yeah.
to really appreciate something beautiful,
Uh-huh.
like a sunset, a flower,
Yeah.
a piece of art, even a well-designed building.
Right.
Anything that sparks that feeling of awe and wonder.
Exactly. And pay attention to how it makes you feel.
Okay.
What sensations arise in your body? What thoughts or emotions come up?
It's like a mindfulness practice,
Yeah.
but focused on beauty. And if we do it regularly,
Yeah.
maybe we can retrain our brains to be more attuned to beauty,
Right.
even in the most mundane places.
I think that's a great idea because remember, our brains release those feel-good endorphins
Yeah.
when we experience beauty. So it's literally rewarding to seek it out.
And maybe if we get better at noticing beauty, we'll start demanding more of it in our surroundings.
Yeah.
It's like we've been settling for these bland, uninspiring spaces for too long.
Absolutely. We've allowed functionality and efficiency to overshadow the human need for beauty and inspiration.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. We can demand better. We can create better.
Okay. So how do we do that? How do we move from appreciating beauty to actually creating it?
It starts with small steps.
Okay.
We talked about bringing nature into our cities, advocating for more human-centered design, learning from the past.
Yeah.
But it also means taking ownership of the spaces we inhabit.
Okay.
Even if you live in a concrete jungle, you can create little pockets of beauty in your own home.
You mean like choosing colors that make me feel good, adding plants, rearranging my furniture?
Exactly. And think about the objects you surround yourself with.
Okay.
Do they spark joy? Do they reflect your values? Even something as simple as a beautifully crafted mug
Yeah.
can elevate your everyday experience.
It's like we're all artists in a way, shaping our own little worlds.
Yes.
And the more we practice creating beauty in our own lives, the more it'll ripple outwards.
Precisely. It's about shifting our mindset from passive consumers to active creators of beauty.
Okay.
And that's a powerful shift. It empowers us to take responsibility for our surroundings and demand more from the built environment.
So we've gone from bombable buildings to brain morphine highs to becoming beauty artists in our own lives.
I like that.
What a journey. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just this beauty is not a luxury. It's not frivolous or superficial. It's essential to our well-being, our creativity, our humanity.
Yeah.
So let's reclaim it. Let's cultivate it. Let's demand it.
Beautifully said. That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of beauty and architecture here on Two Robots Talk with Tinny. We hope you'll join us next time for another fascinating exploration. Until then, keep seeking out the beauty and don't be afraid to create some of your own.